This was a hideous anti-Semitic attack on a charity which provides ambulance services, not just for the Jewish community, but for the whole community. I saw that myself some months ago when I visited the Stamford Hill branch of Hatzola, and my colleague, the member for Castle Point, has been a great supporter of the Hatzola branch in her constituency. Let me start by thanking Hatzola and the emergency services for their response this morning. Anti-Semitic incidents are on the rise. The Jewish community has been targeted again and again, including by the Islamist murder at Heaton Park Synagogue last autumn. The Community Security Trust recorded the second highest ever number of anti-Semitic incidents last year. The truth is, the government must do a lot more to fight anti-Semitism. We have seen a recent anti-Semitic murder and a surge in anti-Semitism, but too little has been done, as this morning's outrage demonstrates. This morning, I visited the Hatzola branch in Golders Green together with my Right Honourable friend, the Shadow Foreign Secretary. I spoke to dozens of people this morning in Golders Green who are now living in fear, including a mother worried about sending her children to school. And anti-Semitism often goes hand in hand with Islamist extremism, a threat we know all too well. The murders on 7/7, 52 people, the murder of Sir David Amis, and the 22 victims of the Manchester Arena attack, all perpetrated by Islamist extremists. 75% of MI5's terrorism caseload relates to Islamist extremism. 94% of terrorist murders in the last 25 years were perpetrated by Islamists, and yet only 10% of the Prevent caseload is Islamist. So I asked the Minister again, as I've asked before, what is he going to do about that? In October, I asked the Home Secretary to use her powers under Section 3, Subsection 5 of the Immigration Act 1971 to remove any foreign national who expresses extremist views, sympathy for violence or terrorism or anti-Semitism or any other religious hatred. She said that she can exercise that power where someone is, quote, not conducive to the public good. It's a wide-ranging power. She should use it. The Home Secretary said she was reviewing the use of the power and promised to update the House, but we have heard nothing since. And so I ask now the Security Minister to update the House on what the government are going to do with that power, and really use those powers to deport the perpetrators of today's attack once they've been caught, if they are not British citizens. Now, since Hamas's attack on October 7th, we have seen protesters marching on London streets openly calling for jihad and intifada. These are express calls for violence. We should no longer tolerate chants at these marches which encourage and endorse violence and which fuel anti-Semitism. They must simply not be allowed. We must do more to prevent anti-Semitic attacks happening in the first place. So will the Security Minister commit to authorising the use of intrusive surveillance powers, usually reserved for counter-terrorism or counter-state threats, to also be used to identify and prevent anti-Semitic attacks which are in the planning? And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, since July 2024, 67,000 illegal immigrants have arrived here by small boat, a 45% increase on the period before. As I've said, the small boat crisis is not just a border crisis, but a national security crisis as well. How can we be sure these unvetted illegal migrants are not linked to terror groups or extremists, such as the small boat illegal migrant Mossas Al-Gassas, who had previously posted on social media brandishing a gun and spouting support for Hamas? If we are serious about protecting the public, we must leave the ECHR and remove all illegal immigrants within a week of their arrival. Mr. Speaker, warm words for the Jewish community alone are no longer enough. We need to take the tough actions that will actually make a difference, some of which I've alluded to this afternoon. The litmus test, Madam Deputy Speaker, is not the good intentions the Minister has expressed today. The litmus test is taking the tough, difficult actions that will actually eradicate anti-Semitism from this country.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let me begin on what I hope is a point of consensus between the Shadow Home Secretary and myself. I think he will agree that any attack on the Jewish community isn't just an attack on the Jewish community. It's not just an attack on London. It is an attack on our whole country. And we send a very powerful message, I think, as a House of Commons if we stand together in saying that that is completely unacceptable. He referred, I think, slightly unfairly to warm words. These are not warm words. These are a statement of solidarity on behalf of government, and I hope on behalf of all of us in this place, to stand with the Jewish community at what is a very significant point of challenge for them, and we recognise that. And we give an absolute commitment to do everything that we possibly can and use every power that we have, and if there's a requirement for additional powers, we will make sure that we put those in place to keep that community safe. Now, the Right Honourable gentleman mentioned the Community Security Trust. I do want to take the opportunity, and I know that he will join me in doing so, in paying tribute to the extraordinary dedication and work, not just of those who are employed by the CST, but the extraordinary volunteer team who I've seen, as other honourable members will have done, doing an extraordinary job under difficult circumstances. They are an inspiring organisation. I spoke to the Chief Executive this morning, and all of us I know in this place will want to do everything that we possibly can to support them. The Right Honourable gentleman, he made a number of points, some of which I think were reasonable, some of which slightly less so. He did make, I think, an entirely valid point about the need to counter extremism in our country. These are measures that we are seeking to take. Again, I would never want to have this debate in a party political environment. We do need to clamp down on those who seek to bring hate to our country. And the Home Secretary is absolutely clear that she will use all of the powers that are available to her in order to do that. Now, the Home Secretary, I think, made a reasonable point about prevent referrals, and he's flagged it with me previously. This is not something that is new to this particular government. It goes back under the previous government, and we are looking very carefully at what we can do to ensure that there is much less of a mismatch in the way that he described, and I give him an assurance that we're looking very closely at that. He also referenced the concern that I know lots of honourable members will have about protest activity that has taken place in recent time. And that is precisely why the Home Secretary has commissioned Lord MacDonald to look at this issue, and we expect him to make recommendations as soon as he's practically able to.
I think on an occasion like this, it's right that we shouldn't apportion blame, that we should try and unite as the House of Commons and say that it's fine to be a critical friend of Israel. It's not fine to go around fully masked up and call for destruction of Israel and therefore the Jewish people. But I think we should be even more positive than that. We should say that we love the Jewish people, that we think they're the most successful immigrant community we've ever had in this country. They are fantastic, and they have our complete, utter and full support, and we will protect them at every opportunity.
I agree with the Father of the House. I think he makes a very powerful point, and I think there is hopefully a consensus around all of that. I do want to take the opportunity to reiterate the government's horror as to what happened. These are despicable things that took place in the early hours of this morning. There is extensive activity underway to try and hunt those who are responsible down, and I very much hope that we'll see progress in the near future on that.
Dr. Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So in our synagogues each week, we pray for the King and for the Almighty to grant wisdom to all his counsellors. Never has such wisdom been more essential. For anti-Semitism and Iranian-backed terrorism are evil bedfellows. Will he join me in supporting all the work of the CST and our emergency services at this terrible time?
Well, I will join with him. The CST is an organisation that I think is very well known to members right across this House. I've worked closely with them for a long period of time. I think they are an inspiring organisation. The government is proud to count them as a very close and trusted partner, and I hope very much that at this moment of challenge for them and for our Jewish communities, that the whole country will stand alongside and support their work.
Sir Oliver Dowden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Hatzola is an organisation that I know very well. It supports many of my constituents and is supported voluntarily by many of my constituents. And they're attacked simply because of their connection to the Jewish community. This is why the community feels so deeply fearful right now. And the Minister rightly said that no Jew should have to lead a smaller life. But they are right now. People are having to hide symbols of their faith, and they fear that anti-Semitism is simply not taken as seriously in this country as other forms of racism. So what can the minister do to reassure my constituents and Jews up and down the country that that isn't the case, because they are deeply worried right now?
Well, let me say to the right honourable gentleman that I can absolutely provide him the reassurance that rightly he seeks. I hope he will have seen the response earlier from the Prime Minister. I hope he will have seen the response from the Home Secretary. I hope he understands the seriousness with which this government take these issues. He's absolutely right to challenge us in the way that he has, but I give him an absolute assurance of the seriousness with which we take these issues, and we will make sure that police, the intelligence agencies, have got all of the resources they need to target those who would seek to cause division and disruption within our Jewish communities. They are precious and valued communities within our country, and this government will do everything that we can to support them.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I absolutely join with the Minister in condemning this evil attack and expressing my sympathy with the British Jewish community. But to build on the point my right honourable friend for Hertsmere made, we've been talking about this for years, including when I sat on the benches over there as a backbencher in the last Parliament, not least when I went to a Hanukkah event in my own constituency led by the South Buckinghamshire Jewish community in December 2024, where the rabbi opened the ceremony with the words of welcome, but saying even though they no longer feel safe to meet as a community. That should shock each and every one of us. So does the Minister accept that this doesn't need incremental change or modest change? It needs a sea change in the way we as a country put our arms around the British Jewish community and protect them?
Well, I'm grateful to him for the point in the way that he's raised it. I mean, I do accept that this government, any government, needs to do everything it possibly can to provide the reassurance that the Jewish community both need and deserve. Some of that is about resource, and I'm pleased that we've been able to increase protective security funding for Jewish communities to record levels. But he's right, there is more that needs to be done other than the allocation of resource. And that is why across government there is a range of different activities underway to try and respond to this particular threat. But I think all of us have a responsibility to be led by the government to make sure that we are crystal clear about our opposition to this activity, and that we will always do everything that we can to stand against anti-Semitism wherever it raises its ugly head.
The United Kingdom remains one of the most tolerant nations in the world, but social cohesion, as the Minister will know, can never be taken for granted. So, well as increasing security around faith schools and places of worship, which I welcome, what more can the government do with the Secretary of State for Education to teach all communities that tolerance and respect for all is a fundamental tenet of being British? Now, of course, he mentions the Bell Review, which again I welcome, the £7 million funding, which I welcome, but the Bell Review is looking at schools and colleges. It is not looking at universities. And a recent report showed that 49% of Jewish students have witnessed glorification of Hamas and Hezbollah on campus. So what more can the Minister do to work with universities, not just schools and colleges, to root out anti-Semitism?
I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman, and I think he makes important points about social cohesion, but also more widely about the importance of activity that takes place in academia and education. I think I referenced the £7 million that the government has previously invested, and I know that the Union of Jewish Students attended the meeting with the Prime Minister earlier today. I'd also like to take the opportunity to commend the extraordinary work of the Holocaust Education Trust. It's an organisation that many members will know and will have worked closely with. They do incredible work. I think the right honourable gentleman makes important points, and let me reflect on them further.
The people who carry out such attacks are mainly seeking to terrorize the target community. But the people who plan such attacks often have another end in mind, which is to set two communities at each other's throats. So without revealing anything one shouldn't about the techniques of the security service, can we spare a moment to pay tribute to those members of the Muslim community who go undercover very bravely to infiltrate plots of this sort, who are briefly seen in court, often under an assumed name, when convictions are assured, and who, without whose work, many more of these plots would succeed than is actually the case?
Well, the Right Honourable Gentleman makes a very sage point, and he's right, I think, to draw a distinction between those who, and I make this point in more general terms because clearly I'm not going to get into the specifics of what happened this morning, but in more general terms he's right to draw a distinction between those who plan the attacks and those who conduct the attacks. I am beyond proud of the work of our intelligence services, who recruit from lots of different backgrounds in our country. They do extraordinary work. By necessity, they do their work in the shadows. But I know I speak for the whole House when I say that we owe them a huge debt of gratitude.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Minister agree with members of the Jewish community who think the hate marches increase the risk of anti-Semitic attacks? And if it does, will he ban them?
The Home Secretary has just banned a hate march.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we shouldn't be surprised at the attacks which happened in Golders Green last evening, because after all, we have been promoting this anti-Semitism in various ways across the United Kingdom, whether it's the sectarianisation of politics that we have seen by some parties directed towards the Jewish community, whether it's a Labour council in Kent promoting an art show which shows Jews eating babies with blood dripping from their teeth, or a chief constable trying to ban Jewish fans based on lies, or the leader of the Green Party now encouraging councils to boycott trade with Israel, even though that would be illegal. Does that not set the atmosphere that Jewish people are a target because Jewish people in some way are doing things that are evil and wrong?
Well, I don't think anybody was surprised by what happened this morning, but it's the absolute requirement of government to make sure that our response is proportionate given the nature of the threat. And I think ultimately all individuals and all organisations have a responsibility for their own conduct. And some of the points that he makes, I think, are not unreasonable. There has been, in my view, an unacceptable climate in recent times where certain sections of certain organisations have thought that it is almost acceptable to allow this kind of anti-Semitic hate. That is not the view of this government. The view of this government is that it's completely unacceptable. And that is why we are organising to make sure that we've got the resources marshalled in the right place at the right time to give our Jewish communities the reassurance that they absolutely need and deserve.
The Minister, among the many reviews he cited, mentioned Jonathan Hall's review, but it's getting a bit long in the tooth. Surely, given the events in North London and the Middle East this month, the reviews that he made should now be expedited, since there appears to be cross-party support for the concept that the IRGC should be prescribed. And can he say why it is that the Wagner Group, which is a state-linked entity, can be prescribed, but evidently the IRGC cannot be, even without changing the Terrorism Act?
Well, I think the Right Honourable Gentleman makes a good point. Jonathan Hall, who has done a lot of good work in this particular area, has made recommendations which the government have accepted. And we are looking very closely at what is the best way in which we can provide the legislation that he recommends. I take his point about urgency. He will understand, as a very experienced member of this House, that I would be in a lot of trouble with the Leader of the House if I started speculating about future legislation. But the government has made a commitment to bring this forward, and we will do so as soon as we're able to.
Final question, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his statement, and also assure the Jewish people right across the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland that we do stand with them, and they're very much in our prayers and thoughts. No one has any doubts about the Minister's or the Government's commitment to standing alongside the Jewish diaspora. But this latest anti-Semitic attack shows the depths of depravity that those who hate the Jews will sink to even today. The symbolism of an attack on ambulance for the sick and the vulnerable cannot be lost upon anyone. It is clear that government steps to combat anti-Semitism do not go far enough. So how will the Minister and the Cabinet make meaningful steps to support this community whose only crime is to exist in Britain and who are British citizens deserving of their full government support? Thank you.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to the honourable member, as I always am, for the wisdom with which he brings to these matters, and he speaks with great experience and passion on them, and has also been a very long-standing champion of all those who seek to practice their religion. I hope through the remarks that I've made today and previously, I've conveyed the seriousness and the importance with which we attach to these issues. Nobody, regardless of their religion, should be in fear that they are going to be targeted in this country. And that is why this is a priority for the government, to make sure that we've got the right resources in place, the right legislative framework, and we're taking the necessary and proportionate actions that we are. My final point, Madam Deputy Speaker, with your indulgence, is just again to thank those brave men and women, and I know that the honourable gentleman will join me in doing this, who serve in our police, who, as we speak, are out there seeking to apprehend the perpetrators of this attack. And we wish them every good fortune with their work.
That is the end of the statement on Hatzola ambulance attack. I'll give the front benches a moment to shuffle over.